Good morning and welcome to Bloomberg UK, a special focus on the biggest challenges facing the British government, economy, financial services and markets. I'm Danny Berger in London. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's inaugural AI summit kicks off next week. He's trying to position the UK at the forefront of development and regulation of a technology that he said could be paradigm shifting. But the guest list is thin on world leaders. Italian Premier Giorgia Meloni is the sole group of 7 leader, other than the host, of course, to sign up so far. While there's still time for late additions, the lack of star power dents the profile of the event as Britain works to forge an international approach to artificial intelligence. Well, we're set with a great panel that knows tech in the UK very well. It is Bloomberg Intelligence's Matt Bloxham and Bloomberg's Matt Bergen. Join me now. Thank you both so much for joining. I want to start with you, Mark, because you wrote a really interesting piece about the UK's AI ambitions, and perhaps it should be a bit more tied to the universities. Is this kind of the one bright spot here in the UK when it comes to technology advancement, the worlds we've built around UK universities?
I think it's one of the bright spots. The other bright spot you could say is DeepMind, which came out of a university, is part of Google, has been part of Google for the past decade. From what we know of the invite list for next week on the corporate side, it looks like, at least for the smaller day where they're sort of inviting the big AI players, it's companies from California. DeepMind is there, but then primarily you have Microsoft, you have Google, you have some startups that are all based in the Valley. I think that's telling, certainly, that a lot of this sort of foundational models, the large language models, this next sort of Gen AI, this paradigm-shifting AI, that's coming from California. That being said, there are a lot of innovations in life sciences and enterprise computing and medical devices that are coming out of the UK. I think this summit isn't necessarily focusing on that.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. And Matt, I do want to talk to you about some of the risks that the summit is going to address. But first, on this idea of whether or not the UK can be an AI hub or a tech hub. I mean, just kind of take us the wide lens picture here, because we've seen so many tech companies homegrown here leave and list in the U.S., like ARM, for example.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the kind of the climate of investment in these kind of startups and kind of venture capital is so much richer in California. That's probably been a stumbling block for technology so far, and even for a big company like ARM, the opportunity either to kind of continue to get investment or get a better valuation on your business is much better in the US. So the opportunity is definitely there, but the current climate and challenges and competition from other countries is immense.
And I know this is something you discussed and wrote about, too, the lack of investment. I mean, how does that change?
There's been a movement this summer to get more, unlock some of the money in pensions.
Right, of course.
And so there's an argument that could be a major change. Just in general, the UK and Europe is about 5 years behind on the venture capital. It's dropped globally, venture capital funding, just with the change in interest rates and the market. So I think that one will just be the change in pensions and LP structure. And then I think, there's kind of waiting for like a big hit, right? You mentioned ARM had listed elsewhere. I think that a lot of venture capitalists that are kind of sitting on money, waiting for a pretty successful exit, whether that's an IPO or an acquisition. And they're hoping that'll kind of snowball into a lot more successful startups. I mean,
it's a tough market for that, though, for deal making in general right now. They're going to be waiting at least another year if that's the case, or years, if not that.
I think that's very true. Right now, the next year will also be, we're going to be seeing how much of this a frenzy and investment around AI was actual hype and how much is real. Companies like OpenAI seem to have like a pretty credible business, but they've also grown, I think, like 4x in the past year. So that's just kind of phenomenal growth that we haven't seen before.
So, that kind of growth in the company is one thing, but whether we're prepared or not for that growth is another thing. And I know, Matt, you've done a lot of work and research on this specifically. I guess how prepared is the world for this new normal and what it means for jobs here in the UK, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think like any technology revolution, we're not that prepared for it, and we don't know really how it's going to play out. And clearly, that there's a lot of research at the moment about how much Gen AI is going to affect jobs. I mean, Jamie Dimon on Bloomberg TV said the other week that the next generation will be only working 3.5 days a week. McKinsey have recently changed their expectations that 60 to 70% of current kind of work could be automated, and that was up from an earlier estimate about half. And they brought forward all their estimates about when Gen AI will kind of match median human capability, and for a lot of those things it's right now, here today. So I think there's a lot of threats there. If you look at history, unemployment over decades has kind of gone up and down, but it's more or less the same as where it was in the 50s. So for the technology revolutions that have come and gone, the net effect on employment hasn't been that material. It's just shifted where that employment is. I guess the big question with this revolution is it's sufficiently different in nature that it's going to have a more profound impact on human capital as part of the productivity landscape.
I mean, it certainly feels different because, I mean, when we were all going through school, the thing was do STEM jobs, learn how to code. Yeah. That's where the future is. And now it's kind of like, well, an AI can code.
It's interesting. I did a session for a bunch of marketers from a big bank the other week, and I asked them by show of hands to say who thought AI was a friend or a foe, and actually 2/3 of them put their hands up saying that it was a friend. So most people are kind of locked into this notion of a co-pilot. These are going to be intelligent assistants that help you to do your job better, be more fulfilled in your work, but they're not going to replace your work. So maybe there's a bit of complacency there, and people need to maybe kind of be aware of the risks and what they need to do to reskill themselves to be prepared for this revolution.
And I mean, in this AI summit, the language we've heard from Rishi Sunak from his prepared speech, Mark, is very much so that, I mean, there's a huge amount of risk. But the companies that are dealing with this risk, have they advocated mostly for self-regulation? Is there a bigger push beyond, governments to have sort of one body that can overlook all of this? Yeah,
there's kind of roughly two camps. One is saying, like, yes, we need to be regulated. It's a little bit associated with the sort of, there's a school of thought that artificial general intelligence, basically like when the machines kind of surpass us, right, is coming more quickly than we expected. And we're not at all prepared to be kind of have a regulation system that's aligned. And the second camp is saying, like, that is not at all true. We hear this a lot from Meta. If you regulate right now, you're going to just kind of give the rewards to a handful of companies, the big cloud providers, NVIDIA, and you're going to roll out everyone else. And I think there's a lot of conversations around open source there. It seems like from the language that the UK put out this interesting series report, kind of a state of a summary of the market right now. And we saw, talked about a lot of the risks. It's everything from like biological warfare to child abuse and terrorism. They talked about some of the downsides of over-regulating, and I think that it seems like they're kind of positioning the UK here as we're not going to be, say, as hard as the EU and that upcoming act, which consistently companies say that is too strong.
Huh. Yeah, I mean, is that something you're hearing too, then, Matt?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And obviously, this week's been a big week in Brussels as the trilogue tries to kind of work their way through that. I mean, they've not come to an agreement on its foundational models that seem to be a sticking point for them. But yeah, I mean, it feels kind of very, very kind of strict and a lot of bureaucracy. If you want to be an innovator in AI, you're probably not going to be thinking about the EU as the region that you do that in. So I imagine that the UK will want to kind of create some differentiation there to kind of boost that kind of notion that the UK is a great environment to kind of be an AI innovator.
But then I even go back to look at who's on the guest list for this UK AI summit. And as I mentioned, the only leader they have is Giorgia Meloni. I mean, can the UK really be a leader in this? Can it coalesce people around the idea that Rishi Sunak, whoever the next government is, that they're the ones who paved the way?
I think that it's notable that from my reporting, they've also extended an invite to China. And I don't know who's coming, but that is something where you probably would not see that in the U.S. right now, given what's happening in the trade war, given the concerns that Congress has made about China and its advancements in AI. And so if there is a true global framework for kind of like a UN body or a global body for regulating AI, there's an argument that UK could be positioned. I thought it was all interesting that later in November, France is hosting its own competing AI summit.
I was going to say, I was like, oh, I'm not too surprised Macron isn't coming to this one. That maybe isn't too much of a shocker. Hey, Matt, Mark, this was so interesting. Thank you both so much for joining today. That's Matt Bloxham from our Bloomberg intelligence team and Bloomberg's Mark Bergen. All right, coming up, we're going to be speaking to the co-founder and CEO of Evident, whose index analyzes AI adoption across the banking sector. All of that next. This is Bloomberg. Economics, finance, politics. This is Bloomberg UK. I'm Danny Berger in London. Now, we're a week or so away from the AI summit here in the UK. We're getting some lines from Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who is speaking in London ahead of that summit. He says that the UK is establishing an AI safety institute. He also has confirmed that China is invited to the AI summit next week. It's unclear who or if China is sending anyone exactly from our latest reporting, but at the moment, the only G7 leader who's attending is Giorgia Meloni from Italy. Let's dig more into this. Joining me now is Alexandra Mousavizadeh, co-founder and CEO of Evident, whose index analyzes adoption of AI across the banking sector. She's also the architect of Global AI Index, the first benchmark to track the strength of national AI systems. Alexandra, thank you so much for joining us. All right, so a couple days away now from this AI summit. You're not too impressed with what we've heard so far from it. What's missing?
I mean, it's a good ambition, of course. At this time, with AI adoption or AI innovation happening at such a speed, there's a need for a global body and an approach on regulation to AI development, for sure. But I think what the UK government is putting forward is slightly toothless. The presentation we've seen so far, or the ideas coming forward so far, is about a voluntary institute where large language model developers are going to be submitting or asked to submit their models and really open the kimono on their AI development. But since most of this occurs in the US and China, I would wonder why they would submit to a body that's developed out of the UK. And also with both the White House and the French government and others putting forward ideas for organization around creating standards and benchmarks for thinking about how we can start to put some guardrails and frameworks and even perhaps build a constitution within and embedded within the AI development platforms. The UK is perhaps doing not enough. And also the question remains whether the UK should be the voice on this and the place to put this forward.
I honestly was going to ask you exactly that. I mean, Rishi Sunak, as I mentioned, did confirm that China is invited. We're talking to our reporter, Mark Bergman, who is kind of saying, well, I don't know if the U.S. would invite China to something like this. So who would be the leader in this? If you have U.S., China, that's where the tech is being really innovated, but there's tension between the two. Who takes leadership on this?
Well, there's sort of two things. There's a tension between the two, and they don't see eye to eye, and it's also very competitive technology. So finding a global body where both of them would submit these models, a place where it would be open for everyone to be monitored and tracked, what's happening on the front end of development. That's one big question. So who would be able to pick up the mantle to do that? The second question that begs is also, with the UK not a country in which these models are being developed, what clout does it have to be able to pull in and say we are the country that should put forward an institute where everyone submits, all global AI developers should submit, because the UK is trailing behind on this, and this is not where the large language model development occurs.
I mean, even if it's not developed here, it'll likely be used here. I mean, it's already being used here. And on this, Martin Weiss, the co-lead of AI at Infosys, said that the UK has 3 years to come up with rules to reassure people before millions of jobs are upended and social unrest is unleashed. I realize there's a little bit of irony because, of course, Sunak's father-in-law founded Infosys. But what do you make of that timeline? Is it 3 years and the world is different?
Well, it's happening. The AI development and adoption in particular is happening at breakneck speed. So I think there are two questions here. One is the speed with which it's being adopted. And, we can see the uptake. There's really a race for adoption of AI. And businesses across all sectors are doubling down on implementing AI across every nook and cranny of their business. And so that pushes the question around what is that going to do to productivity, to jobs, to growth overall. And then there's a question of what's the current pressures from AI that we have today versus what are the big existential risks on the horizon that are more 5, 10 or 20 years out.
So even if not sort of leading on regulation, do you have confidence that out of this UK summit, maybe a different meeting, there can be something at least to address that more social aspect of it?
I mean, right now the UK summit is a very narrow focused on existential risk questions that are very long-term and are controversial because the question of whether we are going to see an existential risk from AI is a question. But the UK can absolutely take up the bigger questions around the impact on our economies, the impact on jobs, inequality, growth, and inequality not just across the developed world and within, but also across the whole world and where AI can be developed and deployed and try to support that. But, there is also an opportunity to really focus on the commercialization of AI to make sure that the businesses that are adopting it are doing it at speed, but also safely. So really the focus should be on the businesses that are adopting AI right now. How are they doing it? And how do we put guardrails around that?
I saw a survey from one of the business lobby groups here in the UK basically saying that the majority of boardrooms don't have anyone who's set up to address AI. And most companies are very sanguine about the risks posed to them from AI. So what does regulation or at least a push from the government look like on a company level?
Yeah, I think it is that the focus needs to be that the onus is on the company that is using the AI. And the principle of do no harm has to be applied, right? So there's a proliferation of large language model development, and it's very hard to monitor. So really, you have to monitor the businesses that are using it. So the onus on a bank or an insurance company or drug discovery platform, that's where the focus of the regulation should be, because taking that responsibility, using frontier AI tools should be. The onus of the business should be on the onus of the business.
And considering you analyze a lot of these businesses, what do you think the hesitancy, the resistance from them will be to something like that?
In terms of adoption?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so we track the sort of the uptake of AI and the adoption of AI, particularly in banks, where we see there's a real race going on to resource that and to implement AI tools as they appear on the front end. And the hesitancy in adopting them is largely down to being concerned about what the oncoming regulation might suggest.
I meant more a hesitancy about taking that sort of self-regulation on at the moment as they're trying to adopt this.
It's an interesting, particularly on the banks, the banks are so heavily regulated to begin with. So actually there's a monitoring that goes on in the banks already from existing, concerns around data privacy and so on. So there's a lot of focus on how the models are being implemented. So there's an oversight on model. There's model risk teams within banks, and then there's a first and second and third line of defense in the banks that are placed there from the regulators already. So in a funny way, the banks are a really good model for how to implement and use AI in a responsible way. There are, of course, concerns about the underlying data and whether there's bias and risks of unfairness there. But for the bank's perspective in particular, the question of trust is a big one.
Okay. Alexandra, really great to get your thoughts. Will be interesting what comes out of the summit. If anything out of the summit next week. That's Alexandra Mousavizadeh, co-founder and CEO of Evident. Now, coming up, as we've been discussing, Britain's Prime Minister is warning on the dangers of artificial intelligence. But can what he calls paradigm shifting on AI help turn around his political woes? This is Bloomberg. Now, today on Bloomberg UK, we've been discussing the upcoming AI summit for the UK. Kicks off November 1st. And, of course, it's kicking off at a challenging time for the Conservative Party. So what does all this focus mean for Prime Minister Rishi Sunak? Let's bring in Bloomberg's Lucy White, who joins me now. Lucy, just on the summit, what is Rishi Sunak hoping to get out of it?
So this is a chance for Rishi Sunak to really kind of set out the UK economy as a forward-thinking, tech-driven economy. This is vital, as you say, ahead of the election next year. We're at a time at the moment where inflation in the UK is still the highest in the G7. You know, we've got increasing numbers of economists expecting a recession next year. Obviously, we've seen Rishi Sunak kind of taking some measures to try and combat the expenditure in the UK. So we've seen him, cancel the northern leg of HS2. We've seen him roll back on some green pledges. But this is a chance to at least make the UK appear as though it has a strategy, perhaps.
OK, then on the other side of things, I mean, what have critics said about this? What are the concerns that are already being raised, even though it hasn't been kicked off yet?
I think, as your last guest said, this is a chance to really kind of bring various experts from around the world together to really create a forum to discuss some of the challenges around AI and some of the risks inherent in AI. We saw the government publish a paper this morning raising some of those risks. It mentioned everything from sextortion to fake kidnapping. But I think, Rishi Sunak really wanted to be able to create a network from this event of experts to kind of formulate that forward-thinking guidance. And there's some rumours around this morning that suggest maybe whatever comes out of this summit isn't going to be quite as lofty as he hoped.
Yeah, so maybe not a big enough, I don't know, distraction is a mean word, but it's all I got right now. Maybe not a big enough distraction from the other political woes.
Exactly, yeah.
Lucy, thank you so much for joining. That is Bloomberg's Lucy White. All right, I'm not going around anywhere. I'm back just after a short break with the Bloomberg Brief. Manus Cranny will join me out of New York. We'll get back to these volatile markets. This is Bloomberg.